Welcome to the Unfettered Speech Podcast. I'm Patrick Sullivan.
And I'm Leonard Goodman.
So our guest today is Nick Cruse, and someone who I think you've had some sort of overlap with in your professional life. So maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about Nick.
Yeah, Nick Cruse. I'm excited to talk to him. He's a real independent young voice, Revolutionary Blackout Network. He is, in my mind, and I'd be interested to hear what he says about this, but I think of him somewhat as following in the footsteps of one of my heroes in journalism, which was Glenn Ford from Black Agenda Report. Somebody that's just uncompromising, anti-war, for the working people, not willing to sell out for clicks. Nick Cruse is one of the only journalists in the country. There was a handful, shouldn't say the only, but certainly no one in the mainstream media, and many in the progressive media also ignored this case. And that was my clients, the Uhuru Three down in Tampa, who were prosecuted for political speech against the Biden administration and against the support for Ukraine and the war against with Russia. They were prosecuted for being agents of Russia. No one would touch that case, but Nick Cruse covered it. I'm excited to talk to him.
Yeah, it'll be great. So let's go to our interview with Nick Cruse. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on, man.
So, Nick, our focus on Unfettered Speech podcast is mainly about free speech, but we get into everything. We're really interested in independent voices. But, we also have an interest a little bit in the independent media ecosystem, how it all developed and how people became successful in various ways. So we're always interested in hearing your story, because right now you've got quite a following. How did it get started and when, and how'd you get from point A to where you are now?
It's quite a story. I actually started off writing on Substack. I had a X account that kind of blew up in the Bernie campaign. I was selling cars back then. I was selling cars for the last few years. That's why having these interviews, I interview people. That's why that's very easy to me because that
was my first job.
On YouTube. What was that?
That was my first job selling cars.
After selling cars, anything I've done in terms of interviewing people, YouTube, that's easy compared to dealing with a lot of these rich sleazeballs that will come in. You know what I mean? So I'm used to, and also through selling cars and just through life experience, I'm beginning to see a lot of inequality.
Was that also in Kansas?
Yeah, Kansas. Yeah, I worked in Kansas City. I also worked for the gas company. I did a lot of different work in my early 20s, and I quickly came to realize the level of exploitation of the working class in this country. Also, growing up in the Iraq War, I feel like a lot of people still don't understand how much that shaped our generation of politics, seeing that level of destruction, seeing trillions of dollars wasted on the Iraq War. So I started off as someone who was selling cars because if you in the business, there's a lot of downtime. I got promoted. I got promoted while I was managing the internet department, and I'm literally on the computer. Most of 80% of the time we're not even doing anything. You know what I mean? Just the capitalists trying to waste our time. So while I'm there, I'm tweeting. This is when people first discovered me, and I'm very averse to social media. I never really was on X or Twitter. I never did any of that stuff, really. Only did it because during the first Bernie campaign, I didn't really do anything. And so for the second Bernie campaign, I wanted to help spread anti-capitalist propaganda as much as I can to help Bernie Sanders. I wanted to take down the corrupt Democratic Party who were driving me crazy. So I was just tweeting. Now all of a sudden I'm developing a large following. I'm releasing these short videos. I had an essay, a Substack article that I wrote that was about rejecting Barack Obama and rejecting MLK. And I explained how neoliberalism destroyed the Black community. The steps that the Black communities took post 60s, 70s, where we embraced consumerism. We was brainwashed by CIA-sponsored hip-hop that made us obsessed with consumerism, bling bling, hood culture. It pretty much destroyed our community. And that was my first article I wrote about. And then that article went insanely viral. It was wild. I still remember Dr. Cornel West shared it. And that's how I became acquainted with Dr. Cornel West, because he read my article. And then all of a sudden, I'm trying to fast forward. There's a lot of things that happen here. But I eventually get invited to help the Bernie campaign in South Carolina. And this is probably one of the most formative times for me as a citizen journalist to answer your guys' question, because I was using this as a project not only to help Bernie in his campaign. You guys know I'm not a fan of Bernie, but this is how I got started. Not only did I want to help his campaign, I care about the message more than anything. Even then, I was like, Bernie, it's whatever, but I want to spread the message of having free healthcare, ending the wars, fighting the corrupt oligarchy. And I get to talk to my brothers and sisters in South Carolina, because that's where they sent me. They need help in South Carolina. I was good talking to Black people and shifting to the left. So I went to South Carolina. I was documenting my journey there. And I started a YouTube channel. People were like, man, you need to start a YouTube channel because you have all these cool interviews and tidbits. I was literally talking to people on the streets and recording it and posting it. I'm mad a lot of these things are lost to time. There's a video, for example, what's that guy's name? He was in the Justice League. He played Cyborg in the Justice League. He would also work on the Bernie campaign. I had a video where we was going around giving speeches to Black barbershops. And I had another speech that went viral. It was posted on Facebook where I gave a speech to Black barbershops. I was telling them to wake up, reject I gave the speech that was complete. It had almost nothing to do with the Bernie campaign. I was talking to them like, hey, man, we need to wake up. That's another thing that helped me get a lot of exposure. And then after the Bernie campaign, I'm like, all right, I might as well keep my channel. I met Rome during the campaign. I met JB during the campaign. And we had this idea of starting a Black left network to the original topic of discussion of independent media. Because I was looking at independent media and I thought it was garbage. I would agree with like what the Humanist Report and TYT say every once in a while, but I still thought it was garbage because Cenk was advocating for war against Syria.
You saw a space for your voice.
We saw there was zero representation of Black radical tradition, and zero. There was only one person, only Black person that was allowed in independent media, and that was Bree. You had Bree, you had Nina Turner. I think Nina Turner is not even that radical, but it was Bree, Nina Turner, and that was it. Like, there was the approved Negroes. And so we're going to start our own channel and spread our voices, and I'm glad we did. So hopefully, I know that's a long answer. I skipped a lot because it was a crazy story. That's kind of how I got started into it, and it's kind of escalated from there.
If I could just mention, Nick, I was a big follower of Glenn Ford. I don't know if you were familiar with his journalism, nice. But you remind me a little bit of a young Glenn Ford. And I remember, I think I was first introduced to him. He was on Democracy Now! It was during the first Obama term, and he just destroyed. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but this other African American who's much more establishment. And they were debating Obama, and I think it was during Obama's first term. And Glenn Ford was just such a clear-headed voice. I became a real follower of her. But the other thing that you mentioned is that the Iraq War sort of got you politicized and got you thinking about a lot of things. I think the other thing about the Iraq War is how bad the journalism was and what a need there is for voices that are independent of the two corporate parties, independent of the war industry, which sponsors so much of our media. So was that also an influence, just seeing how bad the coverage is of our wars and of our foreign policy? Was that something that sort of motivated you to want to get on there and get your voice out there?
It was a combination of the war, the media, and Barack Obama. Because I still remember when I was a sweet summer child. I can explain this to you very vividly, because I remember being 18, 19 when Obama was elected the first time, and I legitimately thought shit was going to change. Like because I know we may be upset at ourselves for supporting Obama. I know it's easy to laugh at Obama supporters now, but I wanted Obama to win because he was running against the war. It's not like Obama ran as he governed and we fell for that. Obama ran on ending the war and a progressive agenda at that time. So I remember being extremely enthusiastic. And that's kind of weird to say now, because I knew our history. I knew what our community had been through. My father told us stories of Jim Crow. He lived in Jim Crow, Alabama. So I'm thinking, like, despite everything that happened in history, we are at a true turning point where things could potentially get better. That sounds crazy to say now, But I truly believe that. Then, right as I graduated high school, what happened? That financial crisis happened. Then Obama betrayed his anti-war promises. So not only did I have the Iraq War and seeing the corruption of our state, I bought into politics. I bought into a leader. I bought into a movement that was supposed to change that. And I saw how government and how society get corrupted in real time. So it was one and done. And I was out. And I from then I was predetermined to spread a message that we should resist the two-party system.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Nick. And I'm from Chicago. So I was out there in Grant Park celebrating Obama's victory, and I had hopes just like you. You know, he was against the Iraq War, whatever that meant. I mean, he really wasn't really in a position to vote on it at that time, but I believed him. I believed he was anti-war. But within 1 year, I was done with Obama. I was representing, at that time, a detainee at Guantanamo Bay. And of course, Barack Obama had promised to close Guantanamo Bay. And what you say about abandoning Black working people, Black homeowners, supporting Wall Street, bailing out Wall Street. Just, it was one thing after another in that first year. And I felt duped. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And it's people from Black Agenda Report, people like Glenn Ford, who woke me up about the Obama sins. Because I still remember during the early days, remember I was young and dumb. I remember I used to make the same liberal excuses. I'm like, oh, no, it's Republican obstructionism that's stopping Obama. There was a lot of cope that I had at the time. Then I remember I read the article it was a Black Agenda Report article, I believe, where it explained how Barack Obama played a big role in taking Black wealth. Then I learned about like Guantanamo Bay. All that stuff came later. I'll start doing my research about all this horrible stuff that's happening or what Obama is enabling. And that was the shift for me. But yeah, 100%.
Well, about 2010 or 2011, I was on a jury, I was called for jury duty. And the case was a young African-American man who was a real estate developer who had, ostensibly overstated the value of his properties, and they went down, and now they're prosecuting this guy criminally, in Trenton for, overstated. And I was like, wait a minute, Countrywide Financial had no penalties for all those crap mortgages they created. Neither did Jamie Dimon. Neither did anybody. They got bonuses. They got taxpayer money and bonuses. And you're going to prosecute this guy? It was unbelievable.
They had to put someone in jail. That was the Obama administration.
Well, they had to, so they found Bernie Madoff, who was just an independent Ponzi scheme running at that time, which happened to, the music stopped when the financial crisis happened. And they said, hey, it was all Bernie Madoff. It was this guy. It was all about this Ponzi scheme. We fixed it. But it gave everyone else bonuses. Nobody was prosecuted. All the banks went on. It's the same as before. And it was just a total scam. So they went after Bernie Madoff. That was in the New York Times' whipping post. And then, they were prosecuting these people who had a $100,000 house that maybe it was only worth 80, whatever, but who Countrywide packaged their mortgage and sent out to people and blew up their pension fund, right? But it's like that's no problem there. They get taxpayer money.
I represented a lot of those people, and they were encouraged by the banks and by the loan officers to inflate their income because they had these ratios that they had to meet, and we weren't allowed to introduce that evidence at trials. It's just, they put false statements on a loan application. And these are the people that were sent to prison by the Obama administration and Eric Holder, who came right out of Wall Street. So.
They didn't want me on that jury, by the way. So, So anyway, that was the Obama years. And I guess, so you just said what was on your mind, and you sort of found people along the way, it seems like.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was making these calculated decisions, because if I was making calculated decisions, I would have been just like a Black Republican, like Candace Owens, the Hodge twins. I was like, man, I'm going to share my pen, try to shift it over to window, see which way the winds blow. And I'm glad that I was able to find people who felt the very same way, which I figured, because I'm talking among our peers, the people who are not heard in the corporate media. And I'm glad he brought the bailouts. And this is something else that radicalized me. I realized that we had a criminal capitalist class that are not beholden to any law. Because you mentioned Eric Holder, I'm glad you did. And the bank bailouts, I was learning a lot more as I became older and more economically literate. And I learned how Eric Holder, and WikiLeaks exposed this, was hand-selected by Wall Street, so he can do the job of protecting bankers as they engage in criminal activities. For example, Eric Holder and the Barack Obama administration failed to prosecute bankers who was literally forging signatures. They caught them forging signatures of customers that they illegally foreclosed on. That's just one of many. That's one thing that lived rent free in my head because there was this black elder lady because they were targeting a lot of black people. That's why black people wealth got taken because they are less likely to legally fight this off. There's this black lady who had any wealth of any kind. She just managed to invest wealth in their homes, especially in a time in society where black people don't have a lot of wealth. Our only wealth that we had was in our homes, and Barack Obama tanked that. And she was one of many. It's an interview that lives rent free in my mind, and that's why I could never support this kind of system.
The other thing I just want to thank you for is you're one of the few journalists that actually paid attention and reported about the Uhuru 3. I represent one of them. I actually talked to Omali Yeshitela this morning. So I told them I was going to be on with you, and they appreciated your support, and no one in the mainstream media would touch that case. So I give you a lot of credit for that.
There was progressive channels that wouldn't touch it because if they touched it, it would have made Joe Biden look bad.
Well, Leonard, just for our audience, just in case they don't know the context, can you just give a thumbnail of that case and what it was about? Because maybe some listeners might not know.
It's a black radical organization that's been around since the 70s. It's founded by Omali Yeshitela. And they're a thorn in the government's side and have been since 1972. Omali Yeshitela comes out of the SNCC movement. They were out there after Russia invaded Ukraine. They were out there saying the same message they've been saying for a decade, that this is provoked. This is NATO expansion. And within 5 months after they were out there making those points and having rallies, and they have a fairly large following, their homes were raided by FBI SWAT teams. All their files were taken, and then they were criminally prosecuted for being agents of Russia. So that's basically the case. And it's a very dangerous case because if you can prosecute activists for anti-government speech, that strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. As you say, it wasn't covered by any mainstream media, not even, Democracy Now! I don't believe covered it even, but.
So I had a theory on that case, and Leonard, I don't think you agree with me necessarily on this, but my theory is that the Biden administration chose those victims because they wanted to go after their Republican enemies, right? And if they said, hey, if we can criminalize opposition to foreign policy, that's awesome, because now we can just throw everyone in jail who doesn't agree with our, forever wars, right? So, but if they picked, someone from the South or someone who is a, far right-wing type person, the other right-wing people would come to their defense. So they found a left-wing African-American hoping that the Republicans wouldn't notice this, that if they could get that conviction, then they just turn the guns on their political enemies and use the precedent.
Yeah, I will go a step further. I think you're on the right track, and I don't really disagree with you. But I will go further than that. I will say that the liberal class always plans to weaponize the police state against their true enemies, the working class and black radical movements. They may even justify they may even use the right wing to justify that. An example of that is AOC and the squad supporting the expansion of the Capitol Police and their powers. Not only did they get a funding increase, they literally got spying powers. They got
the Capitol Police to go to every district. Now they have an office in every congressional district in the country, and they got $3 billion extra dollars.
Yeah, I don't remember every detail of that bill, but I remember I covered it extensively, and it was very shocking to see because AOC and Progressive was saying we need to do this just in case the right wing storm the Capitol. While I was screaming on top of my head that Democrats don't really care about the rising fascism on the right, they're more than happy to collaborate with them. You know what the Capitol Police in DC did immediately afterwards, after they got the expansion of their power? They started going after indigenous people who was protesting Line 3. Something else that none of the progressive independent media channels covered, which hence once again why I got back into independent media, because I noticed a lot of these channels that sound good when a Republican is in charge. I promise you they would have covered it if Donald Trump was in charge. But Joe Biden was roughing up climate activists and indigenous protesters in D.C. And the reason why it was not covered by channels because they did not want to hurt the Democratic Party before the election. that's the quote unquote independent media that has a very large sway and had a very large sway for a long time.
Going back to Glenn Ford again, one of the things that I think made him so dangerous and so unwelcome in mainstream media, and the time that he was on Democracy Now!, that was the last time he was ever on there, when he criticized Obama. Do you have any relationship? He used to call the Black Congressional Congress the misleadership class. Do you have any relationship with Black politicians, or are there any that will come on your show and talk to you, or what is your relationship?
The Black Congressional Caucus is enemy number one. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet Glenn Ford before he passed, but I am honored to have a very close relationship with Maura Kimberly, Black Alliance for Peace. I was actually on the board for Leonard Peltier before he was released, and we did a live show. I think I showed a clip on my channel, or did I not? Well, I did. I gave a speech with Amali in showing the solidarity with Leonard Peltier not too long ago before he was released. So, and also I'm very happy that me and Rome, we have a mutual aid event next month with Fred Hampton Jr. So we try to keep our ties very close, and we build a lot of relationship with the Black radical movement. But the enemy that I believe is the Black capitalist class, the Black Congressional Caucus. Emanuel Cleaver is my congressperson. I remember when I was invested in, I remember during the Bernie campaign, I even thought about running against him. Now, since then, I detached myself from electoral politics, but I looked into Emanuel Cleaver, just another Black AIPAC whore. You know what I mean? He was strongly opposed to Bernie and his movement because he opposed universal health care and just pretty much an anti-progressive. And I noticed that. And that's another reason, and I actually dissed Emanuel Cleaver in that article about MLK versus Jim Clyburn, because when I was initially scouting someone I was thinking about running against as a Democrat, that was back a long time ago, I was like, let me look into it. I'm like, oh, every single Black congressperson, they are the most pro-war. And it's, I don't want to get too about it, but that's another consequence of the Obama administration. Like, Barack Obama single-handedly shifted an entire generation of Black boomers in the Black capitalist class to the right when it comes to war, because they were never perfect. But the Black Congressional Caucus with Barbara Lee and a few others, they will always serve a somewhat weak resistance to the empire. But post Barack Obama, that's gone. The biggest Ukraine cheerleaders you will see is Jim Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries. Jasmine Crockett is the biggest defender of NATO, and she supported the genocide in Gaza. And it sickens me to my core. So my life mission will be exposing these people, which is why they avoid me, right?
Well, let's start with Emanuel Cleaver, and that's your congressperson. So what is his message to his community that keeps him in office?
No one sees
obviously it. He has plenty of money because he's probably gets AIPAC money.
I remember I looked up a town hall, because Jose Vega, right? He goes around, he calls out people for their. It's funny, and I haven't looked at it for a while, but I looked at Emanuel Cleaver's town hall schedule, because I was like, man, what if I have a video of me calling out Emanuel Cleaver, right? He never does it. Like, if you type Emanuel Cleaver town hall, he does not do any town halls. There's no political events. He's a ghost. I think I saw an event where he was like at a Black church. They do like these Black prayer meetings, which is a whole nother conversation for another day, how the Black church enables corruption and neoliberalism. They pretty much clean up the reputation of these corrupt oligarchs like Emanuel Cleaver. I think Cleaver, just like in St. Louis, he comes from a family dynasty of people, of sellout Black politicians who control the area and control the messaging. So I never see him anywhere. I think his messaging is essentially the same as Jim Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries. He just repeats the same script. Many of these politicians, they are literally empty shells. I mean, and there are a few that you will see go on TV. Like Jasmine Crockett is like the Democrats' TV person. Another person who you see on TV a lot is Lindsey Graham. Like, there's 100 senators. Why is Lindsey Graham on Face the Nation every week? Because that's the spokesperson for war that the military-industrial complex chooses. So there are a lot of politicians who are like very vocal, and then there are these shadowy figures. And Emanuel Cleaver is one of those shadowy figures. You will never see him on CNN. You will never see him speaking because you don't have to. He's there to give the military-industrial complex the votes they need.
in my district where I used to live in Princeton, New Jersey, it was Trenton and Princeton were in the same district. And we have an African-American woman whose name is Bonnie Watson Coleman. She's an older lady, and she's been the congressperson forever. And she doesn't do anything for Trenton. Nothing, maybe a swing set now and then, but she's voting for, hundreds of billions to go to Ukraine and nothing and I think she's got a lock on it, because at least in New Jersey, there's no way that someone could primary her. They wouldn't let her. The party would not let her. So, and a Republican can't win because there are no Republicans in Princeton and there are no Republicans in Trenton. So, she's it. And she's just a rubber stamp for whatever comes down the pike. And I mean, honestly, I get her newsletters and it's the most banal stuff about like, hey, the center got a, $10,000 grant, whatever. Wasn't it great? Meanwhile, hundreds of billions to Ukraine and other places too. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I bet people don't even realize how much of a problem that is. Like how many just empty, vacant seats that are owned by corporations. They're straight up owned by AIPAC, and no one can primary them. There's no duopoly.
Yeah, we talked to Ralph Nader about this, and I asked him that question about my congressperson specifically, and he said, well, you could, if you got 1,000 people together, you could primary her. But I think the answer is, at least in the way that the Democratic Party is organized right now, you can't primary her because they control the ballot access, they control ballot placement. I think they even control whether you get on the ballot in the first place. So they're not going to let that happen. And it doesn't happen. And there's a reason it doesn't happen. It's not because people are lazy. It's because it can't happen. At least in New Jersey. I don't know about your state, but.
And that's why I ultimately decided that electoral politics is a waste of my time. Like, because remember I told you, like it was like maybe 6 years ago when I was part of the Bernie campaign. I still believed in the vision. I believed in the vision of taking over the Democratic Party. So I was thinking, like, how about I have a primary challenge against Emanuel Cleaver? It may take a few election cycles, but you know how much money I would waste trying to take on this guy? This guy is a black oligarch in Kansas City, funded by big money, supported by black churches. So my mindset is, let's say I can get a few working class people to donate to me. You know what I mean? That's wasting it. That's why I started RBN Mutual Aid, because I'm like, instead of running for office and losing over and over again, and then let's say I win, like let's say I pull a heist in this century and win, AIPAC is going to replace my ass in 2 years anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's why I came where I'm at. Like, I'd rather spend time doing stuff that actually help people specifically, because it seems like taking these people out using the electoral system, it's just too rigged right now.
Yeah, and you make a good point that 100%. A lot of times when people say, even I think Ralph might have said this too, is even if you ran a win, maybe like the prize that you're getting is a platform, right? To be like someone who can, say things to a national audience.
Yeah.
But, you have hundreds of thousands of followers right now. So you can say things to a national audience. Yeah, you don't need to spend, millions of dollars to run for Congress so that you don't really have a vote that matters, but yet you have a national platform, because you have the national platform.
Yeah, and it's a shame that, and that's why we're in a bad position. People was always programmed to thinking that one unilateral way of how we can affect change. Can you run? Can you win an election? Oh, you can't. Oh, no point even trying. And at RBN, we wanted to brainwash other ways, other ways we can help the working class. Well, brainwash isn't. We do want to brainwash people to be more revolutionary, but we started having a conversation about growing your own food. Now, I mean, what can you do? Like in the mindset of Washington and mainstream establishment, if you're not part of the electoral system, you're useless. That's not true. Rome would never be a politician. But how many people have Rome helped? How many lives have Rome touched and changed? And that's the kind of revolutionary optimism that we want to instill, not the hopelessness that many people feel like whenever Trump wins or whenever a politician they don't like win, that, oh, we're doomed. Oh, we all screwed. That's the Trump derangement syndrome. Like, no, like, let's say you're good at like cooking, baking pies. That's what you do for the movement. You bake pies for the movement. If you're good at making signs, if you're an artsman, if you're a craftsman, you will make the signs that we see at the protest. So we want to activate people beyond just the narrow scope of electoralism.
So Nick, can I just ask you who Roan is for the audience, so the audience knows?
Okay, so Rome is the mutual aid. Is my brother, my RB. He's the CEO of RBN. We founded RBN together. He has an organization called Tour for the Poor. We goes around giving clothes, hosting barbecues, providing school equipment for poor and disenfranchised kids, while advocating for revolution and organizing. So that's been our main focus, is growing our mutual aid system. I have a long-term vision of how we create social change. And once again, I don't think we have social change through the electoral system. I think we have to have our own mutual aid societies. We have to create our own government, our own outside government, and give people an alternative government to support. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Mutual aid is how you do that. It's providing the infrastructure, the community you need to actually plan a organized resistance against the capital.
So it's interesting. That's a little bit, we were talking about Amali Yeshitela earlier, and he does a lot of that too, right? I mean, and in addition, he has his own radio station, or they have their own radio station, their own printing press.
It's about separating ourselves from the system. You know what I mean? If we can have, and this is something that you have to develop over time, what I call a mutual aid society, where people's needs are met, when we have a strong system of support for, and that's what the difference between mutual aid and charity. A charity is just a write-off. It's a event for PR. Mutual aid is about building a structure of resistance. So you can have be self-sustaining outside the system and having your own entity that then you can have this own government, you have this own entity, and you even have those people on the ballot. That's what Amali did. And that's another reason why they went after Amali. Because Amali would run his own candidates. He would run his own socialist candidates that represent his movement. And they would just be on the ballot, give people a choice. And my vision, that's what I want to see happen. I want to see us branch away from the two-party structure, us build our own mutual aid societies, us have our own government, our own code, our own community, our own people. And then we build this movement outside the mainstream. And then we put our name on the ballot, give people options to vote, grow our movement. Then later on, we have militias. We arm ourselves, because what happens when the state that's a whole conversation about the theory of change. But these are how you develop it, by having the structure. The structure of mutual aid is the skeleton in which you build the revolution on.
It makes you dangerous too, because I really think, having your own newspaper, having your own followers that you can talk directly to through web events, or it makes you dangerous, because you don't have to go through YouTube, you don't have to go through Google. It's harder to censor you. I always felt that was part of the motivation for coming after Omali.
It's so important. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's such an important point, because a lot of people forget that Lenin had a newspaper. When he was exiled, he used to write this radical Marxist paper in order to revolutionize the masses.
Who did you say? I'm sorry.
Lenin.
Okay.
Yeah. When he was exiled, he had a newspaper that he wrote and he started distributing across Russia and across Europe that helped spread Marxist ideology. And during the Black Panthers, this is before the age of the internet. So what did the Black Panthers do? They had Black Panther pamphlets with their theory, what they thought. And then you have Fred Hampton Jr., which would do Fred Hampton Sr., the chairman, he would do, which is essentially the same as going live on Twitter. He would go on the town square and he would give speeches to the masses, which is essentially the same thing of us going live, spreading your message. That's having our own working class organizational propaganda arm to counter the ruling class is extremely important, and that it has a foundation of potential successful revolutions, which is why me, Rome, and think it was very important for us to start RBN, and why I think a lot of activists are foolish to discount the power that social media and live streaming can have for our movement.
Nick, let me ask you, sort of pivot for a second to, you talked about AIPAC. I'm Jewish. I'm actually a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, but I heard you make a really interesting point. Something, and you can explain it, but you said something like 90% of Jewish organizations are Zionist or are supporting the genocide in Gaza. And, it made me think, because it's probably true. I don't know the figures that you're quoting, but, there are very few, I think a lot of Jews, especially since October 7th, 2023, have questioned some of the things we were taught. We're very heavily propagandized people. When we grow up, we're taught, Israel we have to support Israel. It was a land with no people for a people with no land, and all these myths that we were taught. And I think, it's easy to buy into that. And I feel like things are starting to change and people are starting to question some of the propaganda that we grew up with. And maybe that gives some hope for the future. So yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, those figures that you were citing, because I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I really hope that is true. I really hope that people are waking up. It's very important for us to remember that Judaism does not have to do anything with Zionism, that we have many brothers and sisters in the Jewish community, like Jewish Voice for Peace, who we quote. I know you probably know, we quote them all the time. We give them props on RBN all the time. So it's very important to have those Jewish allies. But what does this say when I see these reports that all these major Jewish organizations, like there's religious leaders, like people with big influence. It's not about saying that, oh, Jews inherently support Israel. That's wrong. But the institutions themselves, like that means there's a rot there that has to be addressed. The same, and that it had nothing to do with the religion, because I would say that there are rot that has to be addressed in terms of pedophilia within the Catholic Church. I mean, it has nothing to do with religion. It's just the facts of the matter. How could any religion lead to someone seeing children being murdered and laughing at it? I understand that they're religious fanatics, but when you see Telegram channels in Israel that has thousands and thousands of likes of people liking children, and they all staunchly believe in Judaism, I'm thinking, like, what is Judaism teaching people? You know what I mean? As much as I would love to separate the two, that's why I had to bring that up, because I feel like this is a conversation that need to be had. And
it's an interesting point that you made. I mean, there was one Jewish group that tried to sort of get into politics, and that was J Street. And I was a member of that for a while, but then it became very squishy. And you sort of saw they really didn't want to take on power. And when it came to like BDS, they would draw the line. They wouldn't support that. So basically, they were supporting a two-state solution, but they really weren't supporting anything to put pressure on the apartheid regime to change. So I sort of see that as a lot of, what you see in Congress, like the Democrats, like in principle, if you ask them, oh, we support national health care, but they're never going to do anything to get us there. And when there's an opportunity to fight for it, they turn tail and run. So they don't really support it. They support it in name only. And so it's a way to sort of stay in office, but anyway, I thought it was an important point and worth
and it's important to remember, and I mention this on our show all the time, having sellouts in your community is very, very common. I mean, it's a scourge in the Arab world with many Muslim Zionists who capitulate to Israel. The same with the black bourgeoisie that we just got done talking about. Like there's a bourgeoisie of Latinos who are anti-communist. I mean, it's a scourge that we have to deal with. But there is a difference between having sellouts and then having just raw institutional support. And what we call for, and I gotta be very careful here, because I'm not being critical, because I love and admire my anti-Zionist Jews, but I cut out my family members for way less than supporting genocide. You know what I mean? There's a certain point where the red flag has to be drawn, because I've seen with many of these Zionists, there are many of them that said there's no innocent children in Gaza. Like what they are saying, defending rape by the IDF. If I know someone who was saying this stuff, I'll cut them off. I'll either try and change their mind or cut them off. This whole thing that we're going to have the genocide and you're going to have a meal with the people who support this because they're your family, it kind of getting old for a lot of people.
I'm with you. And what you find in a lot of these Jewish communities that are very sheltered, they've never been challenged in their views before, and they freak out. It's almost like, I don't know, you probably saw the Tucker Carlson interview with Ted Cruz. It's like he's around his donors who love what he has to say, and he thinks he's a genius. But when someone challenges him, it all crumbles.
Well, the difference though is, yes, it may be crumble, but it's also, there's a framing in a lot of propaganda. We've talked about this, several times, Leonard and I, that there's a social aspect to it. That if you go into someone who they all believe in one thing and you tell them something different, they say, wait a minute, that means you support Putin. That's an agenda that supports XYZ. That means you're anti-Semitic. If you're not for this government in Israel right now, then you're anti-Semitic. But you become othered and become sort of an enemy just for bringing it up. That's different than I think it used to be. But they've figured out how to give you this cloak of goodness for following the party line, right? That makes you not just a right thinking person, but an actual good person. And it's weird. And especially for some of the things you're talking about, Nick, but that sort of propaganda that becomes social as well is like really strong in our society. But I want to ask you another question about the war and maybe what happened last weekend with Tucker Carlson and others. So, you're a strong voice for anti-war, anti-imperialism. How do you think about people like Tucker Carlson, who, came from a very different place than you did, who you guys seem to have a lot that you agree on right now with respect to that issue, and other people too. Dave Smith, supported MAGA, and this weekend turned, and said, well, I'm not supporting MAGA if they're talking about regime change in foreign countries. That's not what I signed on for. How do you see the world shifting when people like that, seem like they could be an ally of you? Is that something that you are surprised to see, or did you see this coming?
I am surprised to see how quickly many people like Tucker Carlson, many of the even the evangelical. I think Tucker, he sounds like an evangelical to me. Whenever I see people in the evangelical community question, it is surprising, and it shows that the Zionists, their ideology and their messaging is so incoherent that as soon as these topics are brought up, if you're an honest person, if you somewhat want the truth, of course you have to question the war machine, the cost of war, the cost of Zionism. I'm very frustrated by a lot of these people because what they effectively do is they critique Donald Trump. They critique the empire. Then they would tell people who are otherwise anti-war to support someone like Donald Trump, which effectively accomplishes nothing in terms of the anti-war movement. Showing up to an anti-war prep rally once every few years, like Tucker does. Like Tucker does these anti-war rallies, which I think is great. But he still refuses to really, really call out Trump and the Republican Party, how they enable war, which makes it seem like it's a marketing decision. And this is how I view it. It seems like they're making a calculated decision that the wind is blowing in the direction of criticizing the empire. So they want to do that, but not provide any sellable solutions. But I do think they're a great entry point for a lot of people. Like Tucker Carlson was a great entry point for people to start questioning the empire. So it's great to see. It shows that the two-party messaging regarding pushing war is fading really, really quickly. I just wish they get their head on straight. You know what I mean? Like, it's very frustrating to see. I also see Tucker Carlson kill it. You know what I mean? Crushing the game. And then later on, he was explaining how I don't dislike Israel. I think Donald Trump. I think we're beyond the point of just talking about the problems. You know what I mean? We need to start talking about a coherent solution. So I like these people. I'm glad that they exist. I think the phenomenon of them existing is a positive sign. I just wish a lot of them got a little bit more serious.
Well, I think you're right. It could be an entry point because here's what I see happening, at least, so people say, wait a minute, we're supporting this war in Israel. They started it and now they want us to get involved and they want to put our kids on the line. Okay. So then what you see from those same people is a thought process happening. And they go, wait a minute, Israel has free health care. We don't. And we're sending all this money there.
Yeah.
Why don't we? So it's like it starts out with the anti-war thing.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Israel has free tuition.
Then you explain to people ADL. You explain how politicians corrupt our society. That's why it's weird. Like whenever you see like the Mark Levin types, whenever they were like, why are people so obsessed over Israel? They openly brag about corrupting our system. They support the most corrupt politicians. Let's say you're an asshole, you don't care, legitimately don't care about what happens in the Middle East. The fact that Zionists bankroll Nancy Pelosi, the fact that they bankroll Mitch McConnell, Chuck, that's not enough to make you oppose Israel. You can ignore the whole Middle East situation and whole. To me, that would be enough to make me anti-Zionist.
Well,
right?
one could wish Israel well and still be shocked by what Ted Cruz said, that I entered politics to make sure that, I forgot his exact words, but it was basically, to be the strongest supporter of the foreign country Israel. It's like, what? Wait a minute. What? Like, even if you like Israel, it's like, that's a foreign country, Ted. It's a different place. And you're supposed to be representing Texas, which is not Israel.
You see what Randy Fine, that fat ass, you see what he said? He said,
No.
I shook Benjamin Netanyahu's hand, and I was so honored I didn't wash my hand until I got home so I can put my hand on top of my son's head so he can get Netanyahu. It's literally the creepiest. I'm not making that up. He literally tweeted that he didn't wash his hands.
That was super weird.
We were ruled by fanatic psychopaths, like straight up, no other way to say it.
That was weird.
Just speaking of Trump and Trump supporters, I know you've been on Jimmy Dore a couple of times. I've seen you on there. Jimmy talks all the time about sort of uniting the right and the left, because you talk about you're for working people. There's so many working people that are considered themselves MAGA. I mean, do you ever try to find common ground with those folks? Because a lot of those folks aren't down with spending $1 trillion a year on war. When we have Trump that promised to be a peace president, he bragged about starting no new wars. And then he, all of a sudden, when he first got into office, he was talking about cutting the defense budget with China in half. And then all of a sudden now it's like, no, we're going to spend $1 trillion. Well, that's not a defense budget. That's a war budget. If you're spending $1 trillion a year, you've got to find wars to fight. So I guess the question is that something you've tried to do, is find common ground with?
I have had a lot of success in winning. I got actually a decent MAGA following on X because the people see me criticize the Democratic Party. But I will say that I don't actively court them, because we have, I think, what was it, 88 million? The number was 88 million Americans did not vote for either party. Why didn't they vote? Why are they upset? Why? They feel like, and I know I have people in my own family like this. My family is historically apolitical, and they are so apolitical. I had maybe only one political conversation in my entire life with my sister, and it only happened after I became into politics. She started following my work a little bit. She's like, "Oh, Nick into politics, that's weird." So she decided to talk about politics with me one time, and it only happened once. And you know what she told me? She said, "Hey, Nick, what you've been talking about is interesting. I never actually knew that politics was interesting. I never followed it because I know that all politicians are corrupt. Like, to me, it was never worth my time, but I do like following that's literally what she told me. The only political conversation that we ever had, she straight up told me that she don't buy into politics because she knows both parties is corrupt. Do you guys know how much of a common sentiment that is? People just living their life like, oh, what the fucking point? My goal is to organize those people. I feel like people spend way too much time on the partisans. Now, I do got a MAGA following, because if you are principled and you see someone advocating for policies that represent the working class, you see someone calling out politicians. I actually have, I wish I can give him a shout out, because he does deserve a shout out. There was this guy who followed me who liked Trump. He kept seeing my criticism of Trump. Now he doesn't support Trump no more. He's all for organizing. You will get those good faith people on your side no matter what. But there's around a 25% of people who won't budge. They don't care about, if you don't support my party, they don't want to hear from you. That's why I tend not to try to focus too much on those people. A lot of these people, they would, because they are so obsessed over like the culture war, for example, so obsessed over these wedge issues, I feel like they would inevitably throw us under the bus. Like, for example, they ever hear my opinion on immigration. If there was ever a trans person, like how would they handle a trans person showing up to a protest with them? So me, I'm all about having a message of pulling ourselves away from the system, which I think to be clear, I do think that is resonating to some MAGA people, which is why MAGA people follow me. I think it's a mistake to try super hard to win over Biden supporters, to win over MAGA supporters. I think they will come naturally as the pendulum shift, because every time there's a pendulum shift in this country, it's inevitable, because the ruling class will inevitably support politicians. You see people shifting from the left to the right. They go Democrat to Republican. It's our job to pick up the people who will be disappointed in between. There are people who we know we will never win over because they don't have our class interests. For example, we will never win over a Mark Levin. We will never in a million years win over a Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk may disagree with Trump on some things, but he has class interests that will never, ever make him betray Trump. Our goal, and it'd be like I say on this, our goal is to win over the people who fall off the pendulum. So whenever people get pissed off Trump, that's when we come and make sure we sweep them up before the fascists do. because that's what
That's really
happened
interesting.
too.
So I
Right?
heard
Go
that there
ahead.
was a famous con man who said it's much harder to convince someone that they've been conned than it is to con them in the first
Yeah,
place. Like they'll believe the confection
absolutely.
that they've created, but when you tell them it's all bullshit, they're like, no, it's real. It's definitely, I did not get faked out.
Yeah.
So you're probably right. Your most persuadables are that third who don't vote, right, or the third in the middle.
Who are ignored. Like people never talk about them, and the number is growing. Like how long can they keep ignoring this? Like the record is increasing every time. Like 88 million, the most registered voters ever. Before the last election, it was more than that. It's going to keep growing, and the political class can't keep ignoring these people forever. Unfortunately, I think a lot of activists have. You know what I mean? That's why they always drifted to nothingness.
The other saying that, that I always think about is, well, you can't convince someone of the truth if understanding the opposite is what
Yes.
paying their bills. So you talk about someone like Mark Levin. I mean, he's been he's propped up by those moneyed interests, and so you're not going to convince him. Or Ted Cruz. I mean, his whole career he's sponsored by AIPAC, and so. But I wanted to ask you about the business model. I know you've been very generous with your time. We probably need to wrap up, but if you could talk a little bit about the business model, because it's something, we support. We're a part of Integrity Media. We support independent media. We want nonpartisan, non-corporate voices. Some people run ads on their independent platform. Some people don't. Some people just rely on donors. What is your business model, and what can you tell us about that, or teach others about how to make it work?
Yeah, my biggest tip for people who want to get into independent media: you better cut your life expenses real fast. Like if you're actually passionate about it, like if you have a scheme to get rich in independent media, unless you're an unapologetic grifter, which I think that could be a good strategy if you want to be the next Candace Owens style grifter, make a lot of money, I guess. But if you want to do true journalism, you have to expect to live within your means, and that's what I did for a very long time. Luckily, I live in the Midwest, and the cost of living was very low. Like I live on my own now because I had a lot more success, but I had like 3 roommates. Like I only paid for like $300 on rent, because like the first year was brutal. Because most people know my lore. I quit my job and I worked for Bernie. That's why I kind of have a unique start on this, because a lot of people knew I quit my job, and a lot of people wanted to support my citizen journalism because they knew Nick quit his job for the movement. Let's support journalism. So my business model was Patreon to start off with. I had people support my initial Patreon. Remember, I mentioned I had that viral article I posted about MLK and Barack Obama. That one article got me so many subscriptions. Like if it wasn't for that for Substack in the beginning. And like that first year, we didn't make anything on RBN. I was making money from my old Patreon, Substack, individual donations, and pretty much living within our means of being passionate in what I was doing, because I had money at one. Like I was doing pretty well selling cars. You know what I mean? Like my struggle is not one of selfishness. I could survive in America. You know what I mean? I think I'll be fine. I might die early because of lack of health care, but I could survive. It was never about me. I could have continued just selling cars, basically making $50,000 a year, which I think is a lot here. Man, I don't know what people be. $50,000 is a lot here, and that's what I was doing before. But I was like, all right, I got some money saved up. Hopefully I can start this RBN thing strong. Then I had people like Sue Sarandon. She became a pretty big Patreon member. Had all these like Class Traders was very big, because you had people who went to support you, and they believed in your message, which is why I don't want to be too long on it, but that's why like not having a set ideology and being grifter minded will actually kind of hurt you in the long run, unless you're extremely talented. Because if people don't really believe what you're saying, they're less likely to support you. I came live. I was passionate. I had 50 people watching me when I first started. I have 50 people watching me live, but I'll be passionate because I care about what I'm talking about. I think that's what held me afloat. And then because of the great work I've done, I was lucky enough to get a gig at Hotspot. That's why you see me making those Hotspot videos, and that helped me maintain afloat much more. But it's a tough game. It's a ruthless game. It takes some luck in some sense too, because once again, if it wasn't for that, like what happens if I don't come up with that Barack Obama article? Because I'm telling you guys, that's because I have people subscribe yearly because of that. That one article And then I had another article about the police state that did pretty well. But if I don't write that first article about Barack Obama, I don't know. Maybe I don't last that long. You know what I mean? There's some luck into it as well, but there's also a lot of work ethic.
Well, if I could just say it takes some integrity too, because you talk about, you could be sleazy on both sides, but the thing is, there's a lot of money in war. I can tell you that from my background and where I come from. You want to be pro-war. You can be dumb. You don't have to be all that articulate, and you can find people that will pay you. War is very profitable. Peace is not all that profitable. And so I commend you for that.
And I told this story a long time ago on RBN, but when I was on the Bernie campaign, everyone in the TYT network followed me. Like, you guys know, like Majority Report, Sam Cedar. You know how much money I would have made if I made that pivot? There was a lot of these people, like Nina Turner, she was friends with us. Like, she can't stand our guts. She pretended we don't exist now. But people like them, they was telling, hey, Nick, maybe you could be the next AOC. Like, people was telling me this. Cori Bush just won, remember? At that time, Cori Bush won in St. Louis. I'm in Kansas City. And people were like, hey, Nick, you could be the next Cori Bush. And remember, when I supported Bernie, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Then I realized the movement was bullshit. And I'm like, no, I'm good. But if I didn't have integrity, you know how quickly I could have been like a TYT host? It easily could have happened. Like, if I tailored my messages, if I rubbed shoulders with them, but the second I went on Jimmy's show, like, there were people that was like, hey, man, you don't want to be involved with Jimmy. You don't want to be involved with these people. But I was like, nah, fuck that, man. I'm going to talk to whoever I want. The second I go on Jimmy's show, blacklisted. You know what I mean? The second I advocate against voting against Biden, blacklisted. Yeah. If you don't know, there's a clip.
Blacklisted by who? Just explain that.
By the entirety of the progressive media apparatus. And I can tell you exactly when it happened. I remember when I was on Jimmy's show and we were talking about why Nina Turner lost. Like, that was it. That was the moment everyone was like, all right, this dude's done. That was like maybe like 3.5 years ago. At that point, I was going pretty hard at them for supporting Biden, and a lot of them was cutting me off because I had a lot of contacts. I literally was on the Bernie campaign. Like, I had contacts. I knew all these people. I've seen these people make decisions and change, and I could have went with them. Got a progressive job, maybe work at Democracy Now, do some shit like that. But I had the opportunity, but I was like, nah, I'm gonna continue to build my own organization, and which something I strongly believe passionately about.
There's people that have your back.
Yeah, we really appreciate you doing it, and we want to thank you for your time today. It was a great hour.
Yeah, no, it was great talking to you guys.
So, Nick, to tell our audience where they can find you.
Yeah, make sure you guys check out Revolutionary Blackout. I stream around 2 to 3 times a week. I got a lot of ongoing series there. Also, I release around 4 to 5 short videos explaining some geopolitics. That's what we call a hotspot with Nico Howell, David Hadayan. So I have quite a few projects I'm currently working on. But make sure you guys support Revolutionary Blackout, RBN Mutual Aid, and get involved in your communities. That's all I want.
That's great. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you guys. It was a great conversation. Thanks for having me on.